So we are live. Just give it a few moments before you get started.
And I'm going to press start webinar.
Yes, go ahead and do that right now.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to Hearst Castle. My name is Tracy, and welcome you all to today's Ports Home Learning Program. Ports is a great teacher resource for educators in K through 12, and we offer free virtual visits of over 3 dozen California state parks. And our virtual visit today is going to celebrate Julia Morgan's 150th birthday. She is our state's first licensed woman architect, and we're going to honor and celebrate her legacy and explore her architectural styles, her life and her career. And we're going to do that at 2 parks today. The first one will be Asilomar State Beach and Conference Grounds in Monterey, California. And then we'll come back here to Hearst Castle in San Simeon, California. Our program will be maybe a little over 45 minutes today. And I think we have Asilomar with us. We're going to switch over here in just a moment.
Hi, my name is Erica, here with California State Parks at Asilomar State Beach and Conference Grounds. We're located in Pacific Grove, California, and we're excited to be joining our friends at Hearst Castle today to celebrate this very special person, Julia Morgan, the architect who designed both Asilomar Conference Grounds and Hearst Castle. So we're going to take you into a couple of our buildings here at Asilomar, but before we go in, we want to share a little bit about Julia's accomplishments and what made her such an extraordinary person. So Julia was born on this day, January 20th, 1872 in San Francisco, California. She attended UC Berkeley, where she earned an engineering degree and was one of the first women to do so there. She later went on to move to France to attend l'École des Beaux-Arts, a fine art school in Paris. She was one of the first women to attend their program. It took her 3 tries on the entrance exams before she was accepted. And that's not where the challenges ended. She not only was in a male-dominated field of study, but she also had the clock against her. She had to complete her final project by her 30th birthday, and that gave her a little less than 3 years. So Julia was actually able to do just that. She finished her final project less than a month before her 30th birthday. And not only that, she placed first in the competition that her project was entered into. Upon returning back to the United States, she became the first female licensed architect here in California. And she used reinforced concrete, which withheld the earthquake of 1906 in San Francisco. And that really substantiated her work here in California. She was very popular amongst women's organizations, such as the Young Women's Christian Association, also known as the YWCA, and was very championed by the Hearst family, who also hired her for a lot of their projects like Hearst Castle and also Windtune up north in Northern California. So Julia wasn't your typical woman. She didn't have the life style of many women of her time. She never married, she never had kids, but she did design over 700 buildings during her career over a span of 47 years. She retired in 1951, and upon her retirement, she stated, "My buildings will be my legacy. They will speak for me long after I'm gone." So let's go see some of the buildings that are Julia's legacy today. We're going to go inside the Asilomar Social Hall. We're going to see our guide, Aaron. He's one of our guides here at Asilomar and Monterey State Historic Park, and he helps give tours of the grounds here.
Like Erica said, we are in the first building built here at Asilomar. This is the Phoebe Apperson Hearst Social Hall. And it's named after a woman who was very important in both Julia Morgan's life as well as our history here at Asilomar. Phoebe Hearst was the wife of Senator George Hearst and the mother of William Randolph Hearst. And she was a main contributor to the YWCA, the Young Women's Christian Association. And in the early 1900s, the YWCA was already hosting summer conferences and summer camps in the Monterey Bay region. But by 1912, there was a need for expansion. And Phoebe Hearst offered up her hacienda in Pleasanton to host the 1912 conferences. It was during that summer of 1912 that Phoebe made the introduction of Julia Morgan to the YWCA board. Phoebe and Julia had met early on in Phoebe's school years at Berkeley and had already worked with her professionally in scheduling and remodeling her hacienda. So with the YWCA, Phoebe was encouraging them to build their own camp, to buy some property and expand. And so by introducing Julia Morgan to the board, she was able to provide the largest commission of Julia Morgan's career so far. And using her connections, Phoebe Hearst was able to secure 30 acres of land right here in Pacific Grove, where we are today. With the construction of the first building here, it was simply known as the administration building. And the YWCA funded the construction, and Julia Morgan, of course, was brought on as the architect. But it could not simply only be used as an administration building. Because when the camp opened in 1913, this was the only building finished, the building had to be multifunctional. The space behind me was actually a library. There were shelves and a counter where campers could check out books, as well as locals from the Monterey and Pacific Grove area. There was also a classroom in the building behind me where the campers could come and learn skills and take typing lessons, part of their camp programming. The building also had a social component. So here we have our large central fireplace. You will see these in every building that Julia Morgan designs here at Asilomar. A fireplace to bring the room together and provide that hearth and home, the social aspect. So this was a room where the campers could gather at the end of the day after their activities and their lessons, and they could socialize and sit by the fire. And as you can see, this is still a place where people come and gather and socialize by the fire, even today. And at the other end of the room here, like I said, this was the administration building. And so this was where campers would come and check in. There was a store as well as a post office, a place where the girls could buy the supplies they needed and send postcards home. And today it still serves that administrative purpose, having our check-in counter for guests, as well as the cafe. Now the campers themselves, the girls that were coming here to Asilomar, were mostly high school aged girls from the Western United States. And as a YWCA camp, the focus was on leadership and learning and gaining technical skills that they weren't going to be learning in other places. It was preparing these young women for a future that maybe wasn't going to be presented to them through school or through their home life. And so by doing that, the YWCA is really building this new and next generation of young leaders. And who better a role model than Julia Morgan herself for these young girls at Asilomar?
Right, so we're going to take you guys over to the second building built here at Asilomar. It's the Grace Dodge Chapel. We're going to meet our historian, Annie. As we walk out, you guys are going to see the circle. So this is really the center of campus life here at Asilomar. So we have this beautiful campus center with the trees. And actually, I don't know if we can see, but the ocean is just beyond this. So if we were to walk out through the dunes, there's the ocean right there. If you look off to our left, the third building built here at Asilomar was the Crocker Dining Hall. But fun fact, before that was built, it was a repurposed circus tent. And it's a beautiful day. We have birds chirping. Usually here in Pacific Grove, deer are probably one of the most common animals that we see. So usually when we're walking through this area, there's a lot of great birds to see, a lot of great wildlife, and we're actually coming up on wildflower season here at Asilomar. So pretty soon our endangered Mindy's wallflower is going to be blooming. And also another fun fact about Asilomar, it still operates as a conference grounds today. So you can actually come do a conference here. You can actually stay here in hotel rooms as well. So it's still used today for the same purposes that it was built for. We have Annie right over here. Hi, Annie.
Hey folks out there at Asilomar, this is Scott Shepard, your moderator today, and we just had a Q&A pop into the chat in Zoom, and there's just some feedback. It sounds like the screen sharing, when you guys are screen sharing, is closing out the video of the speaker. So just to bear that in mind when you're screen sharing in the future, or maybe keeping your screen sharing to a minimum. But thanks so much for that feedback, anonymous attendee out there watching the program, and handing it back over to you folks at Asilomar.
Hi everyone, I'm Annie and I'm the historian here at Asilomar. Welcome to the Grace Dodge Memorial Chapel. The WYCA camps here were so successful that they needed more classroom space soon after opening. The chapel was constructed in 1915 to meet that need. This building, as well as other Morgan buildings here at Asilomar, features a poured-in-place concrete wall foundation, a concrete entryway, and concrete support columns clad with rough-cut granite stones. Julia had an important relationship with concrete. It was actually her expertise and knowledge in reinforced concrete that put her on the map in architecture here in California. Reinforced concrete was considered a modern building technique at the time, and most architects were not familiar with it. Julia had actually constructed many reinforced buildings in the Bay Area, which most survived the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, which strengthened her reputation. She was soon commissioned after the earthquake to rebuild the Fairmont Hotel in downtown San Francisco. It was Julia's technical expertise, her high level of integrity, her professionalism, and her passion for her design, which allowed her to succeed in a male-dominated field. We're going to start making our way inside. So the chapel actually sits at a higher elevation than the social hall and the dining hall. She intentionally did this to preserve the topography of the grounds, which allowed the buildings to further blend in with the natural environment. Her primary design goal here at Asilomar was to create harmony between the built environment and the natural environment, and to invoke feelings of refuge, peace, and harmony. To create this harmonious relationship, Julia designed the buildings in the arts and crafts style. She also used locally sourced natural building materials, such as redwood, granite, and pine logs. Here we are in the interior of the chapel, which showcases Julia's extensive use of redwood here at Asilomar. Redwood was actually a very plentiful and inexpensive building material at the time, and was commonly used in the arts and crafts style here in California. The wall paneling, the exposed roof structure, and the built-in partitions are all redwood, creating a cohesive and natural feeling. The accordion partitions, such as this one here, allowed for 5 separate classroom spaces here in the building. This space originally had a library around the granite fireplace, which allowed the girls to gather, to read, and to stay warm. In fact, all of the Julia Morgan design buildings here at Asilomar feature fireplaces, which she commonly referred to as the soul of her buildings. Sorry. Oh, other features of the building include the multiple ribbon windows, which provide expansive natural light inside the building. The floor of the chapel also slightly slopes downward towards the west, towards the large picture window, which provides expansive views of the dunes and the ocean. When you're inside this building, you get a really strong connection with the natural beauty all around you.
We've got a really great question from some folks watching here today. It looks like they're wondering, what is the message carved into the wood above behind you?
Yeah, so these are actually adaptations from Psalms in the Bible. And I actually have a printout of that, not on me, but it talks about the mighty breakers of the sea, the Lord on high is mighty. So it's kind of creating this connection between the natural environment and the beauty and power of God, kind of inspiring the girls when they're inside this building, because you really do feel connected to the natural environment in here. But we can post those quotes on our social media, so if anyone wants to refer to that later, we can do that.
And we can see how successful Julia was with kind of bringing in that outside environment with this very large window. It's probably the largest window here in Asilomar. I think so, yeah. And as you look out through the dunes, you can actually see out to the ocean. So they would have had this really beautiful view looking out at the coast, out of the ocean.
So in conclusion, Asilomar is a highly significant example of Julia's work for a few reasons. It's one of her best interpretations of the arts and crafts style. It is also her largest collection of buildings, with 11 buildings still extant and one structure, the entry pillars. It's also one of the only projects she had full freedom in her design. In 1929, she wrote, quote, "I design and build to please the client and their expectations. At Asilomar, the WYCA permitted me to landscape the buildings as I saw fit," end quote.
And that must have been very special for Julia, because she was really someone who designed to what her client wanted. So just down the coast at Hearst Castle, William Randolph Hearst wanted a modest bungalow built, and we can go over to Hearst Castle to see how that went.
All right, so we've added Tracy to the spotlight. Tracy, how's it going over there at Hearst Castle?
Thank you so much, Erica. Thank you, Scott. It is a gorgeous day at Hearst Castle. The sun is shining. And just like Erica said, Julia Morgan was building specifically to her clients' needs. And we are going to see that here. This is the former home of newspaper publisher William Randolph Hearst, art collector William Randolph Hearst as well. So we saw Julia Morgan working with his mother early on in her career. Then she works for the Sun. Now she is working concurrently, building buildings at Asilomar conference grounds and starting this project at Hearst Castle. So in 1919, William Randolph Hearst goes to San Francisco, meets with Julia Morgan in her office, and this conversation is overheard by actually a colleague of Julia Morgan's, a man by the name of Walter Stahlberg. He was an engineer. He hears William Randolph Hearst say to Julia Morgan, "I would like to build something up on the hill at San Simeon. I get tired of going up there and camping in tents. Yes, William Randolph Hearst grew up camping in tents on this landscape that you see out before you, these green rolling hills of the central coast of California. And it's his family's ranch. He grew up here camping. They called it Camp Hill. He was a nostalgic person. He loved the family ranch and he wanted to build a place of his own. He did not want to camp anymore. So he commissions Julia Morgan, California's first licensed woman architects. And they spent 28 years building this house. They never do end up finishing. One of the things that strikes me about Julia Morgan and her lifetime and her career is her dedication. And it's her dedication to architecture, to the work, to her employees and her clients. It's her courage to travel to Paris when there was not certainty that she was going to be let into the Fine Arts Academy, the École des Beaux-Arts, and into the architecture program. It had traditionally been all men. And it's her courage to come and see these 700 plus projects through. So I love her passion. She is starting to build Hearst Castle in 1920. That's when they break ground on the whole estate. Now, this is the time when women are getting the right to vote. And I have some of her drawings that I want to share with you. I do understand, and I do apologize, my friends out there, that when we screen share, the screen does go black for a few seconds. So just bear with me. I think this is a treat, this image I have. It's an advertisement from 1920. And women are typically holding domestic roles. Those are very important roles, but we also do not find many women in professional fields such as architecture. Now, this 1920s magazine advertisement shows a woman in a kitchen cooking at a stove, but on top of that, we see a juxtaposition, a contrast of two different lifestyles. Julia Morgan's sketching, and she has calculations. We see her designs drawn over this picture. What an interesting contrast. We see stars, we see coffers, which are the square portions of some of the ceiling we will see later. We see rosettes. So some of these very sketches on this advertisement, we could potentially be walking near or see ourselves.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Carson, and I'm a guide here at Hearst Castle. I'm going to take a moment here to talk to you a little bit about the design, the overall scale and scope of what Mr. Hearst and Miss Morgan fondly called La Cuesta Encantada, the Enchanted Hill. Now, what you have around us, be it in the walking paths known as the Esplanade or the varying terraces, is what's called a Mediterranean revival. And that really was introduced in the United States in the waning portion of the 19th century, think the late 1800s. But it doesn't really hit its peak until about 1920, 1930. So again, that falls right in the timeline that we're talking about here at the Hilltop for the build, construction, design process. Now, what it really does is it takes portions that really predate that, be it the Spanish Renaissance or Spanish colonialism, also a little bit of Italian Renaissance, French colonialism, the Beaux Arts, if you will, what Miss Morgan was studying directly at the L'École. It also has a little dabbling of Arabic, Andalusian, and also, of course, Venetian Gothic. And you're going to get a chance to see some of that. Now, what I'm talking about really is up behind me, the largest structure here at the Hilltop, known as Casa Grande, aptly named the Big House. All of the structures up here have these kind of informal names, but they are formal. So this one itself, and you can get a chance to, when my colleague goes up a little bit further, to see some of the introduction of these grill workers, if you will. Again, think about that Renaissance stylization, and you're looking at the balconies, even all the way up towards the bell towers. And one of the things that you're going to get a chance to really see, I suppose, is what the guests would have in Mr. Hearst's timeline. But again, if you have any questions, I suppose, are we doing questions?
Yeah, Scott's calling questions out when they come up.
Okay, perfect, perfect. But yeah, we'll get back together in a little bit as far as the design process and talk a little bit more about this Mediterranean.
Thank you,
My
Carson.
pleasure.
And Tracy, we do have some questions coming out from the public. Nobody has typed in any questions about Hearst Castle just yet, but we had a question from Andrew Keene asking about the interior wood finish over at Asilomar. It was so beautiful, looks really perfect, and was wondering what is the finish that they use over at Asilomar. So maybe Erica or one of her friends might want to join really quick to share a little bit of info on that while folks are cooking up some questions about Julia Morgan out at Hearst Castle.
Hi, this is Annie, the historian here at Asilomar. As far as I know, that it's just untreated redwood, unpainted redwood. She wanted to showcase the natural beauty of the wood, which was part of the aesthetic of the arts and crafts style. That's as far as I know. I don't think there's any finishes on the wood.
Very interesting. Thank you for the heads up there, Annie.
Sure.
And then we just had another question from the public. What section of Hearst Castle was completed first? Maybe Tracy, if you want to share a little bit on that, and we've got more questions coming in. So we've seen what section of the castle was completed first. Any ideas on when Hearst Castle will be reopening to the public? And any parts of the castle that weren't finished? Sounds like we might have some audio difficulties over at Hearst Castle, but these are some great wonderings out there, folks. Oh,
No,
Tracy's
we're
back. Tell us, Tracy.
I'm back. Thank you, Scott. We will continue with those questions right after this section, and that way we can get a visual to answer those questions, okay? And
excellent.
We
Thank
see
you.
Julia Morgan in her lifespan here. Now, we do have a lot of classrooms from Los Angeles and across California that have joined us for this special program today. So all my student friends out there, Julia Morgan was just like you. Growing up in San Francisco and Oakland, she played games, loved to play outside, had a bow and arrow. She even played the violin. Then we see her school ID from Paris, and then we see her again when she is working on Hearst Castle. Now, one of her colleagues said about Julia Morgan, she was rather small and light. I suppose she only weighed about 100 pounds or something, and very quiet in her manner. But she was very particular in her work. I know some big men used to quail in her presence. She was very insistent on the work being done correctly and properly. As I understand it, some people used to rather tremble at her because of that. So imagine a petite woman, someone who is 5'1", with such a commanding presence and building places such as Hearst Castle.
Hi, everyone. My name's Mike Davis. I'm on the main terrace, and over my right shoulder, actually directly behind me, is maybe one of Julia Morgan's most recognizable buildings, and this is Casa Grande, the foundation laid in 1922. Now, I know my friend Carson might have mentioned this early on, but I want you guys to think about, like, if you saw this building in your hometown on top of a hill, and you were driving along or riding along on your bike or something, what do you think it looks like? So I want you to go ahead and think about it, maybe put it in the chat, what you think that building looks like. And while you're doing that, let's just do a quick rundown of the statistics of this house. It's 68,500 square feet, 115 total rooms. That includes 38 bedrooms and 42 bathrooms. Guys, he had a 50-seat movie theater as well. And I know one of the questions was, is any part unfinished? one of the things that they wanted to put in underneath the movie theater, how about a 3-lane bowling alley? It's about 137 feet to the top, and each tower has about 2,500 gallon water storage capacity. All right, and it's made entirely of steel reinforced concrete. I know my friends at Asilomar might have mentioned that, but for my younger guests, steel reinforcement, I want you to think about your body. All right, so you have muscles and you have tendons and things like that. Think of your bones as the steel reinforcement. All right. Now, I imagine, today we're in a very remote location, and I have this image of Julia Morgan 100 years ago coming up here, and you guys, technology's changed so much from 100 years ago. And today, you guys could take out your phone, you could take a picture, you could take a text or an image, anything, and you can send it all over the world just like that. Think of Julia Morgan coming up here 100 years ago. And the first thing going through her mind, how am I going to build all this up here? No infrastructure. So first off, she builds a road, okay, a 5-mile road going from sea level to about 1,600-foot elevation. The nearest freshwater system, several miles behind me. It's at a higher elevation, so they designed a gravity flow system to get the water from back there to here. Electricity. There's no electricity up here, so they generated their own electricity using gas generators. They built a hydroelectric plant up here. How about workers? Where do you get the workers from? You're right in the middle between LA and San Francisco. Each one of those places 250 miles away. And when you did get the workers here, how are you going to feed them and how are you going to house them? So Julia Morgan, she was really instrumental in a lot of the, design, both inside and outside, maybe hiring and firing. So if you really think about everything is up here, really it's a testament to how committed Julia Morgan really was for this particular project job, 503 out of over 700 projects.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
503. While she's even working on Asilomar. Now, someone had asked what building was completed first. In this direction, there are 3 cottages that surround the big house, Hearst Castle, in a half circle. We will walk past some of those later. They were built between 1920 and 1924. House of the Mountain directly in front of us is the first cottage to be completed, and it overlooks the Santa Lucias. Now, one of our other questions is what was unfinished? And Mike Davis mentioned there was going to be a bowling alley below the north wing that we see right in front of us. This portion of the house that has the movie theater, the billiard room, and many guest bedrooms throughout the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floor. I will get a little bit closer to show you that they never added the limestone facade that we see on the main portion of the house. We can still see the exposed concrete, which is what the house was made up of, concrete and steel. Julia Morgan builds the first concrete and steel structure west of the Mississippi. And it's their bell tower is located on the Mills College campus. And that was about 1903 or 4. We're inside and we can see the concrete again. We see the exposed material. There's nothing painted. There's nothing cover it. No red velvet like you might see in other parts of the house covering the walls. So some of the staircases were not finished. But the assembly room was. And just like we saw in the chapel at our other site, the fireplace, it's the main part of the house. This is the main feature of the assembly room. This room was used for relaxation. It was used for cocktail hour in the evening when Hearst was entertaining his guests. He even conducted business here. It's one of the largest rooms in the house. In 1922, William Randolph Hearst would write to Julia Morgan about this fireplace mantle. He's excited and he says, I bought the mantle. It is really a wonderful one, and we have got to arrange to use it. This mantle and the tapestries would make any room. It will be carefully packed and shipped. In the meanwhile, I know you will build a hall to receive it. And to give you some perspective on the size of this room, I stand here, the same size as Julia Morgan, 5'1", within this huge space. It's nearly 2,500 square feet. She really built a hall to receive all the treasures, all of the art and antiques that William Randolph Hearst would purchase and transport here to California. The main feature of the room is the fireplace. It's a 500-year-old fireplace that came from France. The tapestries that surround it are of the same age, and they came from Europe as well. They're Flemish. So not only is she engineering and designing the structures of these buildings and Hearst Castle, she's also the interior designer. So let's get in our virtual airplane. And let's see what the hilltop looks like from above.
Right, so here's a chance to really see this almost Mediterranean village right here in the central coast of California. If you look closely, you can see Hearst Castle. That's the Casa Grande right there. And surrounding is kind of a look of some of the grounds and the gardens. And you can see a little bit of those cottages, those casitas. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of iterate is that we have a lot of correspondence between Mr. Hearst and Miss Morgan. Obviously, they communicated in various ways, but primarily letters. So one of the things that in the early days of the construction, Mr. Hearst would write to Miss Morgan that we refer to these cottages as little houses, but they're not really little houses. They're only little as compared with the big central building. And so concerning the placement of the houses, Mr. Hearst emphasized they shouldn't be located too far down the hill, lest the main buildings seem ashamed of them. And you go on to say in their behalf that they could be treated that way if they were servants' quarters or outbuildings of small importance. But as they were dwelling houses of consequence and very pretty buildings, I think they should be brought more into the general composition and treated as attractive features of it. And he would go on to conclude that letter by saying the landscape design would eventually unify all these structures, producing a harmonious whole.
And I think we see that harmonious whole that Annie and Erica had been talking about at Asilomar. We can see it brought together on the hilltop with the 3 cottages that surround the main house in the center. Now we are going to the pool here shortly. Maybe you can find it in this image. Your first clue, it's oval. And we're going to walk down the Esplanade, which is the walking path that brought all of these historic, well, today they're historic structures, together. Casa del Monte, House of the Mountain, named for its views of the Santa Lucias. Casa del Sol, House of the Sun. In the summertime, this area is filled with fragrant roses. This is named for its view of the sunset. And then in the far corner, down the Esplanade, would be Casa del Mar, House of the Sea. And William Randolph Hearst even occupied that cottage for various times when he stayed here at Hearst Castle. Or Casa Grande, as he called it. He rarely called it Hearst Castle. And right beyond the cottages, it's the Neptune pool.
So here's a chance to take a look at one of kind of the focal points here at the hilltop. This is what's known as the Neptune pool. It itself, is holding 345,000 gallons of water. Lengthwise, it's 104 feet. And at one point, it did have, down on my right-hand side, if you're looking across, or the deep end at 10 feet, a springboard for diving into. Now, directly across from us, you might be able to see that pretty well, is this triangular section known as a pediment, and that houses a series of statues that very cleverly Miss Morgan was able to take from Mr. Hearst's art collection and implement into this hilltop. Now, overall, this kind of structure and this texture in this hill, it's almost a neoclassical, if you will. So if you were to frequent, as Mr. Hearst did, and of course Miss Morgan as well, throughout Europe, these areas where there was these seaside villas and palaces, quite often reminisce of that was a series of these Greek and Roman structures, kind of ruins on the outer portions of those villas and areas. But for, of course, Mr. Hearst, this was a recreation area, and a certain delight for us to be able to see here this afternoon.
We get to see a variety of styles that Julia Morgan had built in, and we also can see how she did these things specifically to her clients' needs. She had a long career, almost I think about 5 decades, and almost around 700 projects in her portfolio. And there was a period later when styles started to change in the 30s and 40s, and her ornate designs were no longer desired as much as they had been. She retires in the early 50s, and she passes away in 1957 on February 2nd. She finally gets that full recognition in 2014 when the American Institute of Architects awards her the gold medal. And in the style of Julia Morgan, she is the first woman to receive this gold medal from the AIA. So I hope that we did her justice today in this birthday program. I'll invite my friends back and our friends from Asilomar. If you have any questions, we would love to answer any questions for you. We probably got about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we are going to just close it out with the bells of Hearst Castle ringing happy birthday.
So good news, guys. We've got lots and lots of questions coming out from the public. A nice thank you from Nancy Mann. Thank you, Nancy. One question is, what was the wealth of Hearst during his era? Was he the richest person in the US?
That wealth would fluctuate throughout his whole entire life. He was not the richest. I don't even think he was top 10. He inherits a lot of his wealth from his family. After his mother passes away, his father was a gold miner, and he would also generate his own wealth with his media corporation. When he passed away, I think, gosh, it's been a long time since I said the number, but I think it's 235 million.
In that neighborhood, yeah.
235 million when he passes away in 1951.
Wow, that's pretty incredible.
There was a point, which is funny, he owes his mother several $1 million. So, you know, it really does fluctuate throughout his life.
Very, very interesting. One question, how did Julia Morgan blend Hearst's existing art into the castle from his art collection?
Yeah, that's, so the fireplace was brought over specifically for the assembly room. It's placed in the center. Hearst already visualized the tapestries on either side. He had in a warehouse, he had a 500-year-old ceiling for that room, and he finally had the chance to use it. Julia Morgan would have her craftsmen working with cast plaster and wood and painting it and antiquing these objects. When they had to add in new material, they would antique it to make it look old, because that particular ceiling I speak of did not fit the space that we were in. That space that was almost 2,500 square feet. The ceiling was a little smaller, so they had to add to it. If we go back to the pool here really quick, let me flip my camera so you can see. The Neptune Pool Temple that overlooks the water is a mixture of old materials and new materials. This pool is built, this version, there were 3 versions built over 12 years, but this one is finished in 1936. And the temple has ancient Roman fragments within the structure, within the triangular piece, the pediment, that strip right under it called the entablature, and the columns themselves made out of granite. They are Roman, ranging in age from 1,600 years old to 2,000 years old. So we see how she would integrate Hearst's art collection within the structures and within the space that we were in.
Excellent. Thank you, Tracy. And here's a question for our friends over at Asilomar. It's really a 3-part question. Was Julia raised a feminist? Did she have any siblings? And do we know if her father was an important role in her life? And did he support her interest in architecture?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, as far as her being raised a feminist, I don't really know a lot about her younger years, but I imagine, you know, again, she's paving a way through a school system and a career that is, up until this point, almost exclusively dominated by, you know, males in that profession. And so she did, you know, provide that role model to other girls. And she was, again, working with the YWCA and working with people such as Phoebe Hearst to help empower the people, particularly the young women in the late 1800s, early 1900s that are seeing her do something that literally has never been done before. And there is a lot of correspondence with her father. So her father was her whole family really did play a big role in her support system. And she never married, she never had kids of her own, but she was extremely close to her siblings and their children and her parents for her entire life, definitely. She was very ingrained in the San Francisco Bay community that she grew up in.
Excellent. Thank you for that answer. Another question for folks at Hearst Castle. What's the relation between the Hearst family descendants and the property today?
They're still involved with state parks. You could Google Town and Country magazine online, and you could find Amanda Hearst's wedding photos. She had her wedding here at Hearst Castle.
Very interesting. We just had
I know
another.
a lot of you are wondering about when we're opening, and we actually don't have a date yet. So we can't wait to open too. We miss you all. We definitely want to open soon. They are still doing road work. We're hoping for it to happen very shortly.
Excellent. I'm sure that our listeners are excited to come and visit. Yeah, of course they miss you guys. How could they not miss you guys? Over at Asilomar too. I'm sure they miss you guys. So one interesting question. It sounds like Julia Morgan may have had a driver by the name of Steve Zagar, who was also a driver for Mr. Hearst. Is that true? And do we know if they were friends?
Steve Zagar definitely was a driver for Mr. Hearst. He would pick up Hearst from the train station in San Luis Obispo, which is about an hour's drive today. He would pick up Julia Morgan most likely when she arrived from the train from San Francisco to San Luis Obispo. So the extent of their friendship, I'm really unsure of. But I would definitely imagine that Steve Zagar, the driver for Hearst, which he had his own business in San Luis, and he probably had many clients, and Hearst was just one of them. He wasn't like living up at Hearst Castle. He was picking up Hearst and his guests from San Luis Obispo and taking them up the Coastal Highway 1 here to the hilltop. And that probably included Julia Morgan.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. Thanks for that info. Another question is, and this is going to be a 2-part question for Asilomar and Hearst Castle. So for Hearst Castle, it says, how many animals did Hearst have in their private zoos at whatever time in history that you might want to choose? And then for our folks at Asilomar, what kinds of animals can you see at Asilomar?
So the animals at Hearst Castle were here between the 20s and 30s. A zoo was built to house polar bears, an elephant, giraffe, uh, lions, monkeys. The list honestly goes on and on. It's approximately somewhere between maybe 90 to 100 species. He had one of the largest private zoos here in this country. A lot of the animals would be donated to California zoos when he is hitting financial issues. Again, his money fluctuates. He would donate the animals to save costs. Now, the ranch, which the Hearst Ranch surrounds this whole state park, or about 137 acres of state park, or is it 134? We've somewhere in that range. We are like an island within the Hearst Ranch. So their ranch is out there. Now they have cattle, but they also still have zebras from the Hearst Ranch or from the Hearst Zoo. So on a given day, I might be driving to work up the coast and I see the beautiful water, the ocean on one side and zebras on another side.
Very cool. And let's hear about those animals over at Asilomar. I bet you there's some interesting animals over there too.
Yeah, I don't know if Richard, maybe you can pan across the forest and the dunes and the ocean here. There's also a hummingbird behind you. I don't know if it'll come out. But Asilomar is a great place for birding. We have a lot of deer. So we have the Asilomar pine forest, where you'll find a lot of those animals, squirrels. We've also had some bobcats running around here recently up here in the forest. Out in the dunes, just beyond these trees right here, we've been seeing a lot of coyotes, rabbits, and then just beyond that, we have the coastline. So we have a lot of coastal birds. We have a lot of ocean animals such as sea otters, sea lions, harbor seals, and even further out, we've been seeing whale spouting. So those are a lot of the animals that we can see here at Asilomar.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. We have a couple other questions. We might not have a chance to answer all of them today. A pretty specific question that we may or may not know the answer to, and it's totally okay. Did the same company make the Morgan design tiles at Asilomar as the ones at San Simeon?
Well, we have California Faience in Berkeley making our tiles.
Very interesting. Do we know if at Asilomar, if that was the same company?
Unfortunately, we're not sure. There is some tile work in the dining hall, and she tended to use local contractors. So that'd be something interesting for us to research and figure out.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, here at California State Parks, we're always learning new things about our parks. So these questions really help us learn new things every day. So thank you folks at home for typing in your questions. You know, I see a lot of gratitude from the folks at home who have come on here to join today. And maybe before we sign off, any last few thoughts that you want to share about these two amazing places and this amazing person who we're celebrating?
Make sure to stay for the bells, by the way.
Of course. We don't want to miss those happy birthday bells.
Oh. Sorry, we don't have any cake.
Just a lot more thank you from folks, both of wonderful state parks, and love learning about Julia Morgan. So thank you at Hearst Castle and Asilomar for the chance to learn so much today.
Yeah, thank
Tracy,
you.
are we ready to hear happy birthday?
Yeah, happy birthday, Julia Morgan. Go ahead, play those bells, Scott.
All right. Oh, that's not the right place to be. Sorry, folks. And here we are.
Oh yeah, okay. I was like, yeah, you're still kind of on video. No.
Wow, what a beautiful rendition of Happy Birthday. Does anybody out there in the field want to try and rival that rendition of Happy Birthday before we sign off? Anybody going to sing us this Happy Birthday song before we go away? I know
think
you're
you are,
ready at
Scott.
Asilomar to start singing.
I think you are, Scott.
Right on. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Happy birthday, Julia Morgan. See you folks later.
Bye.
See you, Asilomar.
Bye.